Today we are on our second day of graphing parallel lines. Remember, parallel lines have this same slope. So our directions right now, if we read them, they say, write an equation of the line in slope-intercept form, which is y equals mx plus b, that passes through the given point, so they're giving us a point, and is parallel to the given line. They also give us a line. So we need to find the line that is parallel to the one that they give us. So right now, line 1 is the one that they give us. We already know our m and our b, our slope and our y-intercept. Remember, if there's no number in front of the x, it's 1. So we have a slope of -1, and b, we're beginning at 4. That information we will graph down here later, but we also need to find the equation of the other line. And since we know that the equations are parallel, we know they have the same slope. So if we have this point here, x1 and y1, and we have a slope, if we have a point and a slope, we can use point-slope form to solve for y to get slope-intercept form. So our point-slope form, y minus y1 equals m, and then parentheses x minus x1, we're going to use this to solve for y to find our new b, our new y-intercept. So let's plug in what we know. Y minus y1, which is a -3. Those two negatives make a positive. Our m, our slope, is -1. And then x minus x1, which is 5. I know our slope as a fraction would be -1/1, but since we're plugging it into an equation, I'm going to leave it as a whole number for now. When I go to graph it, I'll make it a fraction. So when we solve this, we're distributing or drawing a box. If you need to draw your box to multiply -1 times x and -5, you can do that. But -1 times x is -1x. A negative times a negative makes a positive. 1 times 5 is 5. And we want y by itself, so subtract 3 on both sides. And we have y equals -1x, and 5 minus 3 is 2. So here's our second equation, so our b is 2. So we can now graph both lines. I'm going to start with the one on the top where we begin at 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. And our slope is -1. As a fraction, like I said, -1/1. So down 1 and 1 to the right. Down 1, 1 to the right. This is our negative slope. We can go all the way across, and we can go up 1 and 1 to the left, the opposite direction. So there's our first line. Our second line begins at 2. This was our new equation we found down here. 1, 2. And same slope, down 1 and 1 to the right. Our lines should never cross. You can see that they are parallel. Instead of down and right, we can also go up and left. And draw our line through there. So there we have graphed both lines and have shown that they are parallel. Now this next one, we just want to figure out the new line that is parallel because there's no graph. We don't actually need to graph it. So we just need to figure out the slopes and our new equation. So in this first line, we actually do not need to solve it for y to find our slope because it's in point-slope form. It's in the form y minus y1 equals m, x minus x1. So our m, or our slope right here, is 6. So we know our parallel line also has a slope of 6. So we need to find a line, like it says here, in the form y equals mx plus b that goes through this point and has that slope. So we're going to use this point-slope form that I just talked about and plug in what we know. Y minus y1, which is -8, those two negatives make a positive, equals our slope, which is 6, and then x minus x1, which is 9. So we need to solve this for y, so it's in the form y equals mx plus b. 6 times x is 6x. 6 times -9, 6 times 9 is 54. And so we have y plus 8 equals 6x minus 54. And to get y by itself, we're going to subtract 8. So we end up with y equals 6x, and these are all negative, same sign, add and keep. So it should be negative 62. And this is why we did not give you a graph, because this would be super silly to begin at a negative 62. So we found this line, which is parallel to the original line. It goes through this point and has a slope of 6. So this is the equation I was looking for. We're going to do the same thing on the back side. Write an equation of the line in slope-intercept form, y equals mx plus b, that passes through the line and is parallel. So in order to find our slope on this first one, we do need to solve for y. So the opposite of multiplying by 2 is dividing by negative 2, divide by negative 2, divide by negative 2. So we end up with y equals 4 divided by 2 is 2, but it's negative, so negative 2x. And then here, a negative divided by a negative makes a positive. 6 divided by 2 is 3. So our slope is negative 2, and our y-intercept, or b, is 3. So there's our first piece of information. So we know if these two lines are parallel to each other, then they have the same slope. So this equation also has a slope of negative 2. So we have the point x1, y1. Let's plug what we know into our point slope form. Y minus y1 equals our slope, x minus x1. I would write this somewhere on your paper when you get your homework, because that equation is not going to be on there. It is on the wall in the classroom if you need it as well. So let's plug in what we know. Y minus y1, which is 5, equals our slope, which is negative 2. And then x minus x1, which is also negative 2. Those make a positive. So if we distribute here, negative 2 times x is negative 2x. A negative 2 times positive 2 is a negative 4. So we have y minus 5 equals negative 2x minus 4. But we want y by itself, so we need to add 5. And we get y equals negative 2x. Negative 4 plus 5, there's more positives, there's one extra positive. So y equals negative 2x plus 1. So our b is 1, our y-intercept. I know I went through that a little bit quick, but you guys know how to use point slope form and solve for y. You also should know how to solve it, to graph at this point. So I'm going to start with our first equation up here, beginning at 3, 1, 2, 3. And moving negative 2, our slope, negative 2 over 1, so down 2, 1 to the right, down 2, 1 to the right, and then up to 1 to the left. There's our first line. And the second line right here begins at 1, and same slope, down 2, 1 to the right. You can make it a fraction if you need to. Down 2, 1 to the right. These equations are super close together. Or up 2, 1 to the left. As you can see, if they were to continue, they would not cross. Alright, last couple problems. Oops, I don't want both blue. Come on. Let's go purple. This is in the form y minus y1 equals our slope, x minus x1. So we can actually find our slope without even solving anything. Our slope is right there, kind of hard to see, 2/3. So if these are parallel lines, this slope is also 2/3. But we want an equation in the form y equals mx plus b. We have a point and a slope, so let's plug in what we know into point slope form. So we have y minus y1, which is 2, equals our slope, which is 2/3, and then x minus x1, which is 18. And solve for y. 2/3 times x, 2/3 x. 2/3 times negative 18, I know it's going to be a negative, so I'm just going to multiply it out up here. If you wanted to plug it in your calculator, you could do 2 divided by 3 in parentheses times 18, and that would also give you the same answer. So if I multiply straight across, 18 times 2 is going to give me 36. And 3 times 1 is 3 on the bottom. 36 divided by 3 is 12. So that should give us a negative 12. And then our last step, we want y by itself, so add, add 2 to give us y equals 2/3 x. There are more negatives. How many more? Negative 12 plus 2 is now only negative 10. So here is our equation in the form y equals mx plus b. That is parallel to this line and goes through the point 18, comma 2. All right. Oops. On your homework, you have a few questions. You may need to solve for y for both if you are graphing. Otherwise, if there's not a graph, you need to get to the form y equals mx plus b.